Hi, my name is Ryan Jensen. I am Associate Pastor for Congregational Care here at Roswell Presbyterian Church. And here we are talking with Jeff Myers, who just wrapped up the book of Jonah. 4 chapters, 3 sermons. Great tie-in with what Carrie preached last Sunday and connecting these signs. And we should be sure to point out that what happened at first was a bring up of Ace of Base, which, if you're not familiar with Ace of Base was a band that had a hit song in 1993. I Saw the Sign.
Mm-hmm.
At
It's a
that time,
banger,
I
dude.
was
It's a banger.
either wrapping up my freshman year or about to begin my sophomore year when that song came out. So I
Of,
heard that song.
of high school or college?
College, a little older.
I was in high school, man, and being like a freshman in high school with that song, I mean, that's just right in the sweet spot of getting on the dance floor at the prom, at the fall dance.
Well, I feel like it also it was kind of in that Third Eye Blind era.
Yeah.
Maybe that was a little later.
I think that was like 96. I always dated to like what I was doing when that song came out and like uh when a certain song came out. And I remember going on dates with Third Eye Blind in the car. That
I
was
went to
and their big hit was kind of suspect uh content wise.
I went to an Alanis Morissette concert during that time
Dude,
on a
okay.
date with a girl named Angela. What I did not know was that Angela was bringing 2 of her best friends.
Oh, you had chaperones.
So, well, I felt like a fourth wheel. I wasn't exactly a big fan of Alanis Morissette at that time either. So,
Yes. Well, this is a true story, Ryan. 2 weeks ago, I had lunch with a family that has recently joined RPC, and the dad loves music, right? So we start talking about music, and he says, "My 2 daughters got on stage with Alanis Morissette last year and sang Ironic with her in Chicago to like 15,000 people." And he showed me the video. It's incredible.
I was trying to think of one of the lines from that song.
Don't.
It's like 2,000 spoons when all you need is a knife. Yeah,
Yeah, the irony of the song Ironic is it's not that ironic.
no, it's more coincidental.
uh, when it rains on your wedding day, how's that ironic?
That's just. I think it was like in the midst of like a streak of sunshine, but it rains on your wedding day.
Oh, Alanis. One of my favorite Canadian. I love all Canadians.
Some good basketball players come from Canada.
Yeah, Shea Gilgeous-Alexander hit a big shot last night.
And a pop star, a hip hop star. Isn't that where Drake is from?
That's true. Drake. Also, Neil Young. Also, Leonard Cohen.
You know where Drake's dad is from?
I do not.
Memphis.
Is that true?
I think it is.
I think it is.
Let's go with it.
Do you know that Drake was a child actor?
No.
A lot of kids. He was in the show. I think it's like Degrassi, and he was a kid in a wheelchair. Yeah, Drake. Who knew? And I like to show the pictures to young people so they can know where he came from.
I think what did the same was true of Ice Cube before he came like a hardcore rapper. He was like in a lipstick man.
I think that's true. Today it was a good day. That was an important song in my childhood, Ice Cube.
Well, another song that came to mind was Dust in the Wind, because you were talking about the dust of Nineveh, where Jonah was called to go. Instead, he was trying to flee to Tarshish.
That's right.
So the sign that you brought up was the overt sign, the big one that, that Jonah was in the whale for 3 days. And then from that, you have emerging into the sunlight, rising again for 3 days, the Jesus connection, resurrection story. But you
Right.
got some more subtle points.
Yeah, and I think I was drawn from Eugene Peterson's great book, Under the Unpredictable Plant, which is about the book of Jonah, and he kind of reads the story as a story about one's vocational call to ministry, which anybody who would dare to follow Jesus Christ is called to, and we got to find our own way. And a lot of times we have to read and understand and interpret the signs that God sends in our way. And I Nineveh. And Tarshish is an idea, it's a dream, it's a vision, it's not really real. Whereas Nineveh is the place he's called. It's got dirt, it's dust, it's a concrete place. And I think so many of us, and I mean, I'm sure you meet with a lot of folks we're that are living in a dream world, and we have to love our concrete people that are with us, our imperfect children, our flawed spouse, our congregation that is full of sinners, and sometimes ourself, that I can't do everything, that I am not perfect, and so that's difficult sometimes to do.
Yeah, I was wondering about that because we're encouraged to pursue our dreams, to chase our dreams, to fulfill our dreams. But how do you discern the difference between your dream and your call?
Yes. Yeah, and that takes wisdom. I think we have to be realistic about ourselves. I think we have to have a community around us of friends, of people that we trust who are also wise, that can help us discern God's call. And then I think Scripture also is one of the key ways that directs us. Jesus is asked a question: what's the greatest commandment? He says, "Love God and love your neighbor as yourself." So if you're someone that says, "Well, I'm called to go do harm somebody or do violence," well, I can pretty much say that doesn't sound like it lines up with Christ's call to love God and love neighbor.
Yeah, I was trying to think, just like in my own life, I had ideas, but people kept telling me to go to seminary. I mean, for years, go to seminary, and I literally ran the other way, by going back to Memphis, lots of times,
Yes.
trying to relive some of my old days.
You
And
were
people are
walking
like,
in
"No,
Memphis?
seminary. You need to go to seminary." And I went and visited too, and I felt like, no, that's not for me. And then I ended up in youth ministry in another place. And there in that place, they kept saying, go to seminary. And I thought, that's just what they tell people
Well,
who
and
are in youth
sometimes that's
ministry.
true, but for you, what was the turning point for you to go?
Well, when I started to listen, and I think that was one of the more subtle points. One of the signs in your sermon was Jonah refused to listen.
Hmm.
And then he didn't understand that listening was connected to loving. You can't listen to someone, or you're more inclined to listen to someone when you know that they love you.
That's right. I think that's totally true. And if they don't, if you're suspicious that they don't love you, you're suspicious about them. You don't trust them. You kind of brush them off. Um, and I think the Proverbs, isn't there a great proverb that says the wounds of a friend can be trusted? Um, but the like the compliments of an enemy it should not be. I think there's a lot of wisdom in that.
Yeah, I know when I interviewed with you and Lindsay a couple of years ago, you made it clear, like, this is not a place to learn how to do this craft. You need to hit the ground running. But which I was like, can do, but at the same time, you have to, this. I mean, it takes time for people to get to know you, to trust you, and to understand that you have all of our best interests at
Right.
heart.
Yeah.
You can't just like stroll up in here and then day two you launch a capital campaign.
Right. No, that's absolutely right. Yeah, you gotta you gotta learn about your environment, the people. I remember that. I was just telling somebody about that conversation when we went out to coffee with you, and you were like we thought you were like so quiet and serious. And so afterwards, Lindsay and I were talking. We are like, man, is he like? Do we make him nervous? He's so quiet. And then I think Lindsay said to me, she was like, maybe it's because we did all the talking.
I felt that way with the search committee because they were such like great friends, and we had some really great characters on that search committee. And I went home, and Laura said, I think I shared this earlier. She said, how did it go? And I said, well, I don't know. They did all the talking, and I felt like I really missed out on the opportunity to kind of promote myself.
Well, and I do know your search committee, and some of those were on mine, and there are some great talkers in there.
Well,
But I think one of the things that's emerged as we've gotten to know you is like your incredible sense of humor and dry sense of humor that people just absolutely love. And I thank you for bringing such a joy and a sense of humor to our staff and our faith community here at RPC.
well, hopefully, over a year and a half in, people know that I love them. But again, that after I think it was in Lawrenceville for 11 years, and I felt like year 8, 9, 10 that I could finally say and do some things that were pretty bold because if not now, when?
Yes. Well, and Peterson in his book, his memoir called The Pastor, Eugene Peterson, and he served a church, I think, for 30 years. He planted in Maryland before he became a professor at Regent in Vancouver, Canada, speaking of Canada. And he says you don't really become people's pastor until you've been someplace 10 years. And I think that's an exaggeration. I think that's a little bit of hyperbole, but what he's trying to say is don't come in guns a-blazing right off the bat. Like you have to build trust. It takes time to build authentic, meaningful Christian community.
And then you moved on to God's wrath and how we're to understand what that means.
Yes.
Which I had Elvis pop up in my mind with a hunk of burning love, but that was not where you went.
A great song though. Speaking of Memphis. So I always, and this is and people that have been around me long enough are just like, my goodness, stop quoting Karl Barth on this. But I just think Barth is right when he says, God, when we read of God's wrath, we should read, it is the burning fire of God's love. That it's always in God's wrath is in service to reconciliation and to the restoration of relationship. So like in the Old Testament, like God gets a really bad rap because people see God's judgment, God's punishment, all this. But if you read the stories and you read the details, if you actually read them, you see the people are a mess. They're constantly rebelling. They're trying to sacrifice their children. Their brothers are selling their brother off into slavery and then telling their dad he was killed by an animal. The people continue to rebel and worship idols. They break the 10 commandments again and again. And yet God is continually saying, come back, come back, come back. And sometimes
that's where it linked back to Carrie's sermon where she told the story of the I sent you a boat, I sent you a helicopter, how did you think I was not trying to save you? In the Old Testament, I sent you Moses, I sent you the 10 Commandments, I sent you the law, I sent you the prophets, I said, you wanted kings, I didn't want you to have them, but you demanded that you would have them, so here's how they should behave. And of course, they didn't, but
right. And read about Saul, David, Solomon. I mean, all the rest of them. I mean,
Like, I sent you all these people. How do you think I'm a God of wrath? I'm a God of love, but you're just not listening.
right. And I think of like good parenting, like our kids are going to misbehave. I know you're shocked by this, Ryan. I misbehaved as a child. And luckily I had good and loving parents that when I was sent to timeout, it was to wake me up to good behavior and things that were good for me. They had my best with everything I wanted to, because I had to be formed morally and spiritually and ethically to hopefully emerge into and become into a good person, a virtuous person. But that takes training.
Yeah, I think to understand God's wrath in that burning love context, it is helpful to think of God as a divine parent. And as a divine parent, when we disobey, when we hear but don't listen or refuse to listen, it makes sense that God would be angry, upset, disappointed. But all of that not out of I'm going to smite you,
Mm-hmm.
but I love you.
Right. Well, and Calvin, he says, where's the Christian church? It's where the word is rightly proclaimed and the sacraments are rightly administered and church discipline is practiced. And people always think of church, or not always, but I think people often think of church discipline as like shame, shame, know your name, like, but I think of it more of like, if you're an athlete and you play on a sports team and you go in and the coach says, all right, we're going to welcome to practice. Just feel free to shoot baskets for a while. And, maybe we'll run around a little bit and then we'll be done and just do what you want. We'd be like, that's a terrible coach. No,
Yeah.
you got to practice defense. You got to practice plays. We have to get in shape. We have to run lines. We have to shoot free throws when we're exhausted. Why? We have to discipline ourselves so that we're ready for the game, right? And I think in the same way, God disciplines us. We have to go through discipline and training to be ready for the game of life.
Yeah, in that game, I mean, the coach might, scream, stomp, yell, call players, horrible names. And you think, man, that coach must hate that guy. But he said, no, I'm coaching him that way because he has the potential. And I love that guy. And I want him to reach that potential.
Yes. I think about like Greg Popovich for the Spurs, who just stepped down for so many years, coached so many great players. And he was often very harsh and tough with his players. But how many NBA championships did he win? Right. And he has this stroke. And so all his players come back and they help escort him to the podium where he announces his retirement. It is this beautiful image of, yeah, spent his career yelling and training and disciplining his players, but his players knew he loved them and he wanted the best for them and get the best out of them. And now these guys are Hall of Famers.
That was a critique of Josh Pastner, who's now the coach of UNLV. Before that, Georgia Tech. Before that, Memphis. The critique was that he's just too nice. Like, he would slam the scorer's table and say, Jiminy Crickets. And he's like that because he's one of the few who refuse to curse. But he knows how to coach. He'll have players that he coached 20 years ago that he'll still call and wish a happy birthday to. He's an excellent human being, but they said he just didn't have that fire in him to come down and instill fear within these players.
Yes.
He would yell at them and they would laugh. So
I read his I think his son or daughter played in the same league that our oldest son did. And so I ran into him once. So I was like, and he's not very tall. Like and I saw him and I was like, hey, coach. And he was like, hey. I kind of took him by surprise.
But if he got to know you, he would probably give you a phone call.
Yes.
And I mean, he's just an excellent human being. But again, sometimes it takes, and in my own parenting role, I try not to lose my temper. I try not to yell. I try not to use words that I couldn't say from the pulpit. But sometimes I've got to do all those things to get the children's attention and to make sure they understand this is not okay.
Right. It's like one of my children ran into the street. And I yelled at him. I was like, you cannot run into the street. Am I being mean? No. I'm trying to wake them up to the danger of traffic.
To get that point across.
Right. And I think God does that with us. Now, one of the things I always return to Augustine, okay, 4th century bishop. The new pope is an Augustinian, okay, so out of the line of St. Augustine. And one of the great themes of his theology is this: sin, okay, rebellion, disobedience against God's command. Sin contains the seed of its own punishment. So I don't think sometimes it's not helpful to think of God like exterior coming in and punishing us, but that it's hardwired into reality. So that if I'm always gossiping and telling lies about my friends, guess who's not going to have friends? I'm going to suffer the punishment of not having friends. If I cheat on my wife and commit adultery, guess who's going to have a broken relationship and be kicked out of the house? I'm going to experience the punishment. And we see this. And this is with anger, envy, greed, that all of these sinful behaviors, these vices, lead to our own undoing and our own punishment, and we suffer the consequences. But it's not coming from exterior. It's embedded in and hardwired into the nature of reality in human life.
Mm-hmm. So another point you made was it was kind of like linked to evangelism, but I was thinking about one of my critiques of church today, not RPC, but just church, faith in general, is that we have somehow personalized it. Like, this is for me. This worship service is for me. This sermon is for me. This music is for me. Is to lift me up, is to fill me with love. And I think sometimes we can get to the point where we understand that it's for us. It's for, this is for all of us as a community of faith. But where we rarely get is to the point where we say it is for them. And that's something that Jonah was not willing to, or he was reluctant to share, that God loves you too.
Yeah. And it's more than just about me.
Yeah.
And there is no me without we, right? That we're part of a faith community. And I love Karl Barth's vision of the church. It's a place where we gather, we build up, and we send out. And the church is not for itself, but it's for others in the end. And how can we be in service to our broader community?
Yeah, that message of God is slow to anger, abounding in steadfast love. Again, that's if we only understand the Old Testament as a prehistoric New Testament where God was different and more, angrier and full of wrath, we have to remember that that's where that phrase came from.
Right.
And more than once. Slow to anger, abounding in steadfast love. And that's a message not only for me, for us, but for them, the people that I don't necessarily think, I know I don't like them. And I would like to think that God doesn't like them either, but I'm called to go share God's love with them.
Right. That word steadfast love is hesed in Hebrew. And it's one of the key Old Testament words. It's often sometimes translated loving kindness or faithful love or steadfast love. It's God's kind of relentless pursuit and commitment to us and to God's people and God's world. And it's a tough word to get into English, but it's again and again used to describe who God is and how God acts towards us, God's people, and God's creation.
Well, then through Jonah, God's able to relay that message to the people of Nineveh, which saves not only the people, but all of creation, including the animals. That was your final Yeah, sometime.
Yes. Love the animals.
Doesn't that show up in the flood where like God promises not only to not destroy humankind again, but promises not to destroy the animals? Like I think it's a promise that's given not just for the people, but for all of creation, including
The animals.
the animals.
Yeah. And yeah, and I always love that passage. And like I think going back to the creation story, when human beings are given dominion over creation, especially the animals, and Adam, the human is naming all the animals. There's this great ecological caretaking that we are called to. And dominion is not to dominate. Dominion means to caretake and we are custodians of creation. And I think Christians, unfortunately, have sometimes forgotten that vocation to take care of creation, to take care of our animals, that they're a gift in custody to us, but they're valuable to God.
Yeah, and that's probably a sermon for another day because I think about the disconnect that we have these days. I mean, 100 years ago, when people lived on farms, raised their own animals, they understood the value and the sacrifice of taking the life of one of those animals. When I was a kid, I grew up in a small southern town. A lot of people hunted and fished, and I shot a deer. And I remember not taking any pleasure in it. I, I did it. We harvested the meat, ate the meat. I have a coat made from deer skin that I don't wear because it's pretty bizarre. But
I want to see it. You got to bring that
yeah,
in.
my dad had it made for me. It's like, it has bone buttons and all kinds of things. But to understand, now we go to the grocery store, we don't even think twice about it. You just have like a whole meat section, everything's wrapped in cellophane, and I think kids probably just think that's where it came from.
Right. Well, and who knows now? I mean, they're growing meat. I mean, we're so disconnected from the
Well,
land
the
for most of us.
industrialization of it all, yeah.
Yeah.
So that wrapped up Jonah. Next Sunday, this Sunday, we have one service, 10 o'clock, ordination and installation of elders. And what will you be preaching upon to bring
We're
that
going to
in?
we'll be looking at Ephesians chapter 4. It's where Paul writes to the church in Ephesus and talks about our calling. What does it mean to be called? Called to lead, called to serve. And we'll be reflecting on vocation in general, specifically for our elders who are stepping forward to serve the congregation for the next 3 years, but also what that means for the rest of us who are not going to serve as elders, but we're in the pews. Are we called as well? And how do we discern that call and how do we respond to it? I've got to do that the rest of the day.
How tempted are you to clean your house?
I'm pretty tempted.
It's this time, a little after 10 on a Wednesday. If I'm writing, I'm thinking, I think there's some clothes in the dryer that need to be folded. There's some things that need to go into the wash.
Yes. My wife
I
might
need,
appreciate that
I need
too.
to exercise. I need to do some stretches.
I don't care about the sermon. Go do the housework.
Yeah.
All right, buddy.
Well, thanks for a great sermon, great series. It's always good to learn that Jonah is more than a book about stuff that has not just the whale.
That's right. All right, buddy. I'll see you soon. Thanks, Ryan.
Thank you, Jeff.